The 7-decade economic alliance between the United States and Europe is rapidly transforming into a direct rivalry that threatens the stability of the global West. This shift is fundamentally altering the flow of capital and industrial power across the Atlantic, and the first impact is appearing in the heart of European manufacturing. As the United States implements universal tariffs and aggressive subsidy programs, it is no longer just protecting its own market, but actively pulling the core industries of its closest allies toward its own shores. For European leaders and businesses, these policy changes are not simple diplomatic disagreements. They represent a structural breakdown where the two pillars of the Western economy are now pushing each other away to ensure their own economic survival. The traditional bond, where the United States provided a security umbrella while Europe integrated into a dollar-based trade system, is being replaced by a much colder reality. Recent data from global trade monitors and financial reports confirm that this tension is already deeply embedded in the current market. When the United States moved beyond threats and actually implemented these new high tariffs, it became a physical barrier that is effectively strangling the European automotive and precision machinery industries. In response, the European Union has drafted massive retaliatory measures and accelerated its own digital service taxes, creating a cycle of economic friction that has not been seen in generations. This sensitivity is why the changing relationship between Washington and the European Union matters so much to the rest of the world. European manufacturers, already struggling with high energy costs, now face the risk of being shut out of their most important export market or being forced to relocate their entire production to North America. The United States still maintains its role as a global leader, but the reliability of the Atlantic Partnership as a unified economic bloc is no longer guaranteed. So the real question becomes clear. Why is the relationship between these long-standing allies shifting from deep cooperation to such intense competition? The answer begins with a history of a bond so strong that it once seemed impossible to break. This deep integration was not a result of simple diplomatic goodwill, but a strategic necessity born from the ruins of the Second World War. To prevent the total collapse of the Western world, the United States launched the Marshall Plan, which was a massive financial rescue package for the shattered infrastructure of Europe. Instead of just providing aid, the United States poured enormous capital into European factories and roads, effectively acting as the ultimate venture capitalist for an entire continent. As these resources flowed across the Atlantic, the Bretton Woods system was established to create a new rule for global money, placing the American dollar at the center of everything. This system linked the value of European currencies directly to the dollar, ensuring that the American currency became the primary lifeblood for the European recovery. Under this new financial order, European nations gained the stability they needed to rebuild their industries while becoming permanently connected to the American financial heart. The relationship further solidified with a unique trade-off known as the Transatlantic Security and Economy Package. Through the creation of NATO, the United States provided a security umbrella that allowed European nations to stop spending heavily on their own militaries. With their defense guaranteed by Washington, Europe was able to focus all its national resources on internal prosperity and high-end manufacturing. In return, the United States secured a vast and reliable market for its own industrial goods and established the dollar as the undisputed global currency that everyone had to use. For decades, this arrangement served as the most successful model of international cooperation, where the prosperity of one side became the direct foundation for the stability of the other. Within this framework, the economic interests of the United States and Europe were no longer separate goals, but parts of a singular Western mission. This shared mission soon evolved into a deeply integrated production system that operated as if the Atlantic Ocean were merely a narrow river. The core of this unity was the creation of a massive transatlantic supply chain designed for maximum efficiency and speed. Take the automobile industry as a prime example of this deep integration. Major German car brands began to treat their massive production plants located in U.S. states, like South Carolina and Tennessee, as if they were their own local German factories. Through this seamless connection, high-tech components designed at headquarters in Munich, Germany, could be shipped and installed in a vehicle on an assembly line in Alabama, USA, within just a few days. This was the birth of a just-in-time system that spanned 2 continents, where geography no longer limited the speed of manufacturing. Beyond the world of factories, The integration of digital and financial infrastructure reached a level where the two regions began to function as a single economic unit. American technology giants provided the software and cloud systems that powered European industrial centers, while European financial institutions managed the capital that flowed back into American markets. This fusion created what experts call the transatlantic value chain, a dominant economic force that at its peak controlled more than 50% of the world's total wealth. By combining American innovation with European manufacturing precision, this alliance set the global standards for everything from aircraft safety to financial regulations. The stability of this system allowed global businesses to invest billions of dollars across borders without fear of political interference or sudden trade barriers. For decades, the priority of this unified West was always the optimization of cost and the acceleration of global trade. Investors and consumers alike grew accustomed to a world where the products they used were the result of a seamless collaboration between American and European minds. It was a period of unprecedented economic harmony, where the goal of maximizing efficiency overshadowed any nationalistic concerns. However, this perfect system that reached the peak of efficiency paradoxically began to collapse as the priority of security started to overwhelm the logic of cost. The shift in the global geopolitical landscape forced both the United States and Europe to rethink their fundamental trade principles. The world moved away from the era of pure free trade and entered a new period of what experts call friendshoring, where supply chains are built only among trusted allies. While this change was intended to increase safety, it introduced a deep contradiction that began to tear the transatlantic bond apart. The United States shifted its focus toward rebuilding its own domestic industries, prioritizing national control over global cooperation. In this new era, tariffs are no longer just simple taxes. They are being used as sophisticated economic weapons designed to neutralize an ally's strongest industries and force their factories to relocate across the ocean. This led to a fierce competition known as the Green Subsidy War, where the two allies began to treat each other as economic rivals. The Inflation Reduction Act in the United States used massive tax breaks to lure European clean energy companies to move their production lines to American soil. In response, the European Union introduced the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, a new type of environmental regulation that effectively acts as a strategic barrier against foreign goods. These policies were no longer about growing together, but about capturing the industries and jobs of the future at the expense of the other side. What was once a win-win partnership has transformed into a zero-sum game, where one side's industrial gain is seen as the other side's direct loss. The strategic trust that allowed billions of dollars to flow freely between the two continents has been replaced by a cautious and defensive national interest. This fundamental shift in policy has sent a clear and painful message to the global market. Now, the alliance is no longer a partner helping each other's prosperity, but has turned into the closest threat that takes away domestic jobs and future growth. This transformation is creating a painful reality for the core industries that once served as the heart of the Western economic engine. The most immediate tragedy is unfolding in the manufacturing sector of Europe, where the cost of production has spiraled out of control. After losing access to cheap Russian pipeline gas, European factories have become forced to rely on expensive liquefied natural gas, primarily supplied by the United States. This massive energy asymmetry means that a steel mill or a chemical plant in Germany now operates at a significant cost disadvantage compared to its competitors across the ocean. As energy prices remain high, the manufacturing strength that Europe spent decades building is being hollowed out, leaving the continent's economic future as an unintended hostage to American energy exports. While industry struggles with physical costs, a new and invisible barrier is rising in the world of high technology. The conflict over technological sovereignty has led to the implementation of the European Union AI Act, a strict regulatory framework designed to control the influence of dominant American tech firms. Europe seeks to protect its own digital borders and data privacy, but these regulations are creating a literal digital wall that limits the integration of cutting-edge artificial intelligence. American technology giants view these rules as a direct attack on their innovation, while European leaders argue they are necessary to prevent total dependence on foreign platforms. This clash of standards means that the digital infrastructure of the West, which should be unified for the next industrial revolution, is instead splitting into two different systems. From the heavy assembly lines of the automotive world to the invisible algorithms of the digital age, the fundamental trust that once connected these sectors is rapidly dissolving. With the vital veins of industry and technology now being severed, both sides are forced to confront a reality they never anticipated. As the essential parts of this economic system continue to break apart, they are now facing the most expensive question in human history. That question is whether the United States and Europe can truly function as independent economies after 70 years of total integration. To understand the weight of this decision, we must look at how their industries are so deeply locked together that one side cannot leave without causing its own destruction. Recent simulations of global supply chain decoupling suggest that a complete split would trigger a permanent drop in the gross domestic product of both regions. The cost of rebuilding separate industrial bases and replacing lost markets would lead to a massive spike in consumer prices and a long period of economic stagnation. However, the danger of this divorce extends far beyond the borders of the West. The fragmentation of the Atlantic Alliance is creating a significant geopolitical vacuum that provides an unexpected advantage to rising powers in Eurasia. China and India are already moving to fill the space left by Western division, positioning themselves to secure the resources and influence that the United States and Europe once controlled together. As the West becomes distracted by internal competition, the dominance of the dollar-based trade system faces a new and credible challenge from these emerging markets. A weakened and divided West means a world where the rules of global finance and security are no longer set in Washington or Brussels. This shift suggests that the cost of separation is not just measured in lost profits, but in the total erosion of the strategic leadership the West has held for a century. Despite these immense risks, the political momentum toward national interests continues to drive both sides further apart. The reality of the modern era is that while the cost of leaving is too high to pay, the trust required to stay together is no longer there. This leaves us with a haunting question that will define the next decade of our lives. If the two pillars of the West can no longer stand together, what kind of world are we actually heading toward? The answer reveals a future where the clash between Europe's pursuit of strategic autonomy and the rising neo-isolationism of the United States becomes the new baseline. European leaders are no longer content with being a junior partner and are moving to establish themselves as an independent third power that can stand between Washington and Beijing. At the same time, the United States is increasingly turning inward, focusing on its own industrial revival and reducing its willingness to pay for the security of its allies. For global investors, this fundamental shift introduces a new era of the Atlantic risk premium, where the stability of the Western market can no longer be taken for granted. The age of simple and unified asset allocation is over, and we must now navigate a world where political friction between the U.S. and Europe directly impacts corporate earnings and supply chain costs. This means that every investment strategy must now adapt to the permanent reality of tariffs and regulatory walls that have already begun to rise within the Atlantic corridor. We are witnessing the end of an era where a unified West set the pace for the entire planet. The shared identity that held these two continents together for 70 years is being replaced by a cold environment of national calculation and individual survival. It is a world where the old rules of cooperation have been discarded in favor of a desperate race to secure the industries of tomorrow. So we must ask ourselves if we are prepared for the consequences of this grand divorce. The single team known as the West, which we have known for generations, is now disappearing into the pages of history. What remains is a world of cold interests and strategies where every nation must fend for itself. The end of West? The alliance is over, and the era of every nation for itself has begun. The price of that choice will be much higher than any of us ever imagined.